There was once a city the world believed could never fall, not because it was lucky, not because it was ignored, but because it was built to be untouchable. Walls so strong they had stopped armies for centuries. Defenses so advanced they made invasion almost impossible. And for over 1,000 years, no one could break it. But here's the part history rarely explains. The city didn't fall because it was weak. It fell because it believed it was too strong to fail. Strength is dangerous, not when you're building it, but when you start trusting it too much. This city had everything: strategic position, brilliant engineering, a history of survival that stretched across generations. Every enemy that came before had tried and failed. And with every failure, something changed inside the people who defended it. Not their walls, not their weapons, their mindset. Because when something works for a very long time, it stops being questioned. It becomes accepted. It becomes trusted. And eventually, it becomes assumed to be permanent. That was the first mistake. Not visible, not dramatic, but powerful enough to shape everything that came after. Because the moment you stop questioning your strength, you stop improving it. And when you stop improving, you start falling behind, slowly, quietly, invisibly. While the city remained the same, the world around it did not. Far away, new ideas were being tested. New technologies were being built. New strategies were forming. Not just stronger weapons, but smarter ways of using them. The rules of conflict were changing. But inside the city, nothing felt urgent. Nothing felt different, because nothing had forced them to change. And that is the danger of long-term success. It creates a false sense of security. It makes people believe that the future will behave like the past. But the future doesn't follow history. It disrupts it. And when the next force finally appeared at the gates, it did not come like the others. It did not rush blindly. It did not attack without thinking. It observed. It studied. It adapted. It looked at the city not as something invincible, but as something that had simply not yet been understood. And that shift in perspective changed everything. Because once you stop fearing something, you start analyzing it. And once you start analyzing, you begin to find patterns, weaknesses, openings, not obvious ones, not visible to those who had always trusted the system, but real, because no system is perfect, no structure is eternal, and no defense is immune to change. The city still stood strong. From the outside, nothing looked different. The walls were still there, the defenses still in place, the confidence still present. But something had already begun to shift, not in the structure, but in the balance. Pressure was building, quietly, slowly, strategically, and the most dangerous part was this. The people inside the city did not feel it, because when you trust your protection, you stop looking for danger. And when you stop looking, you stop seeing. That was the second mistake, because while they stood behind their walls, confident in what had always worked, the force outside was creating something new, a way to challenge what had never been challenged before. And when that moment finally came, it did not look like the end. There was no instant collapse, no dramatic signal that everything was over. At first, it looked like nothing had changed. The defenses still held, the walls still stood, but beneath that appearance, the system was weakening. Pressure was being applied in ways it was never designed to handle. And slowly, what once felt unbreakable began to strain. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to create doubt. Enough to create instability. Enough to create the one thing no strong system expects: failure. And then it happened, not as a grand moment, not as a single event, but as a shift, a small opening, a mistake, a point of vulnerability that should never have existed, but did. And once that opening appeared, everything accelerated, because strong systems do not collapse slowly once they are breached. They collapse fast. And by the time those inside realized what was happening, it was already too late. Confusion replaced confidence. Reaction replaced control. And the structure that had stood for centuries began to fall, not because it was always weak, but because it was no longer prepared, because the rules had changed, and it had not. And that is how something that seemed permanent becomes temporary. The fall did not just change the city, it changed perception, because for the first time in centuries, the world saw something it did not expect. A system that was supposed to last forever had ended, and that changes how people think. It forces a question. If this can fall, what else can? That is how history shifts, not just through events, but through belief being broken. Because once people see that something powerful can fail, they start looking at everything differently. And that is the true impact of moments like this. Not just the fall itself, but what the fall represents. So, what do we learn from this? Not just as history, but as a pattern. Because this pattern still exists today. The first lesson is simple. Strength is not permanent. No matter how powerful something becomes, it must continue to evolve. Because the moment it stops evolving, it starts becoming outdated. The second lesson is even more important. Confidence can become blindness. When you believe something cannot fail, you stop preparing for the possibility that it might. And that is when failure becomes most likely. The third lesson is about awareness. Because danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it builds quietly. Sometimes it adapts. Sometimes it waits. And if you are not paying attention, you will not see it until it is too late. And finally, the most important lesson of all, the greatest threat to any system is not always the force attacking it from the outside. It is the belief inside that it cannot be broken. Because once that belief takes hold, everything else begins to weaken. And when that happens, collapse is no longer a possibility. It becomes inevitable. And that is how a city that stood for over 1,000 years fell, not because it lacked strength, but because it trusted that strength too much. And once that trust replaced awareness, the outcome was already decided. Because in the end, history does not favor what is strong. It favors what adapts.